Hello and welcome to the Learning Kerv, the podcast from Kerv that delves into the latest developments in information technology and explores how organisations can put them to work for the good of their people, their customers, society and the planet. My name is Rufus Grig, and in this series, with the help of some very special guests, we've been looking at all things generative AI. We've covered a lot of ground over the previous 5 episodes, from first principles of AI and machine learning to the ethics and sustainability implications of doing AI responsibly. And now to wrap up this series, we're going to round off with a look at the current hottest topic of Agentic AI or AI agents, and then finish off with a few of your questions. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that I'm joined yet again by my partner in crime from the first couple of episodes, none other than the force of nature that is Will Dorrington himself, CTO of our transformation practice, Kerv Digital. Will, welcome back.
Nice to be back, Rufus. Really enjoy these. Looking forward to this. It's such a hot topic. It's getting hotter as the weeks go on. So, starting to crack this door open on Agentic AI will be fantastic.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm looking forward to it too. And I think we better start with a question that says, what is Agentic AI? You did name drop it back in episode 2, and it's so hot. We hear people talk about AI agents, Agentic AI. Go on, demystify. Tell us what it is.
So Agentic AI is really the next step beyond generative AI. While generative AI creates content in response to prompts, we all love and use ChatGPT. I'm sure you can put in a prompt to write you a poem about Rufus and his musical hobbies, and it would generate one. This one actually works slightly differently. Agentic AI adds autonomy. So it can plan, it can decide, and it can act to achieve goals. So think of it this way. Generative AI helps when you ask it to, write some coding or draft a report. Agentic AI works proactively. It breaks down tasks into steps, gathers all that relative information and input, then makes decisions and iterates until it reaches your desired outcome, whatever that may be, all with really minimal input.
Okay, so is it too simplistic to say that ChatGPT is one shot? I'm going to ask a question. It could be quite a complex question, and I get a response. But Agentic AI is likely to have there be multiple steps in the process, and the subsequent steps after the first one might be different depending on the scenarios.
Yeah, it's absolutely more iterative in the way that it works. So it's more of an evolution. It still uses the same foundational models as generative AI, and it can, in theory, use the same sort of approach in regards to prompting, but it applies them in a goal-driven, adaptive way, and that adapt is really key. So that shifts us from tools that react to prompts or multiple shot prompts, etc., to actually those intelligent agents that solve those problems autonomously in both digital and physical world. So it can reason on its own, and reason is a key word there.
Okay. So before we get into some examples, I just want to make sure there are 3 words that are incredibly similar that we're using but aren't quite the same, and that's agentic, agency, and agent. They're all almost the same. Let's start with agentic. What does agentic mean?
I don't always look at it in that manner, as in breaking it down in that sort of clarity. What I look at as is an agent is a system that acts autonomously to achieve a goal, right? So taking actions on behalf of a user or a system. That's an agent. That's the one that's actually achieving the goal and going forward. So terms like I think you mentioned sort of AI agent, or if you look at software agent, all that is a pure clarity around, we're talking about tech rather than someone at the end of a phone call on a CCAS system. The term agentic describes the quality of acting proactively on something. So that's the agentic nature, but the agent's actually carrying it out. And I think what helps expand that even more is, agents will always operate in a loop, this perceive, reason, act, iterate. So gathering those inputs and signals, whatever they may be, planning and deciding those actions, then executing those tasks, and then readjusting.
All right, brilliant. Thank you. That's really cleared that up. So let's have a think about some real life examples, and then perhaps we can unpack what's really going on under the cover there. And, I always find talking about something in real life helps take it from the abstract into something I can really, really comprehend.
Sure. Yeah, obviously, we discussed this offline before we go onto these podcasts for a few minutes when we remember we're doing them. I remember one that stuck in my mind was, it can help you complete boring IT tasks. And I'm like, yeah, anything boring is top of my list for me. So think about the way that we have to monitor and run system checks to see if there's some security patching. You can instruct an agent to say, hey, proactively monitor this system, how often as you like, then actually check what's missing, install the updates, and then once you've actually done that, then go back and tell us what you've done. So give us a report. But you're not having to get involved there. What you may have to get involved in, and when human in the loop comes into it, is when something fails and it fails again and it fails again. And you're not sure why. Another great example is like booking some travel, right? So the agent can pull your calendar, book your flights, your hotels, your rental cars, your reservation at the bar you like based on your preferences and the delegation of authority you give it over your bank account to spending limits, and then send you that complete itinerary. So it can work as your personal assistant there as well, which is fantastic. I mean, it's going to be one of the first things I create for sure.
The agent that's monitoring a critical system, that seems to me like a development of something that we've had in IT for quite a long time. You've got a system, I don't know, maybe it's an air conditioning system or whatever it is. I've got tools that are monitoring it. And what will probably happen if it detects something's not going right is it will, in the old days, a klaxon would sound. Yeah. Now it's more likely a dashboard light changes.
With green, orange or red on it, for sure.
Yeah, and somebody sitting there monitoring it then does something about it. So that's the old world.
Absolutely.
And the new world is the klaxon effectively informs an AI agent that can then understand what it might need to do to resolve the situation. And I only sound the klaxon to the human if the agent fails to be able to resolve it automatically.
That's exactly it. So actually, even in the new world, before we started getting to the agents approach, we would maybe actually run an error code through a large language model to understand what the error code means in plain language. But I would still go to, someone within IT, someone like yourself or I, to go, okay, yep, we know what that's missing. We need to update that, but it's having issues unpacking the packaging or whatever it may be. But now it's going, that's the issue. I've now been given the agentic approach to go off and actually execute this myself up to a certain limit. So it'll go and then execute that. You're spot on.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to your other example, which was more personal, the booking of travel. Because, travel, it's really complicated. I've got to get somewhere. I know I need to be at this place in this country at this time.
Yeah.
And you sort of working backwards from that. Do I need to get there the day before? Do I need a hotel if that's the case? How long is it going to take me to get from my house to there? What if I'm not in my house at the time I'd need to set off? There's multiple legs of decision making. I'm then looking at differences in cost. I'm looking at preferences around sustainability. Now, that is really, really complex. It taxes my brain trying to book something quite similar. Is AI really up to the job of managing those multiple steps?
Do you know what? The answer is yes and no, isn't it? Because it's only as good as the information it can sort of reach. So once you've given it the fact that you want it to go off and book this holiday for you, it will go through elements of reason. So if it already knows kind of what your movements are, when you want to get there, and your preferences around location, and everything else that comes up. I'm really fussy when it comes to hotels. I'm off on TripAdvisor, I'm Google reviewing, I'm looking at all those star ratings. So as long as you can sort of say, this is the quality I want, then it can still go through that reason approach. So it's not just one shot and it's gone. It can come back to you and go, look, I found this. Are these okay? I'm worried about the fact that this is a 4-star or a 3-star, doesn't have a pool, doesn't have a bar. So it can still give you the option, if you design it so, to take further input before it goes off and executes. But it will get to a point where if you feed it enough information appropriately, that human in the loop gets minimized because your confidence goes up in it, because all of a sudden it's getting better answers, it's getting better responses. And in this case, it's booking better holidays for you, which would be a lovely outcome.
And that's really interesting, that feedback, because we're talking about an agent that is built on top of AI systems, but we're training it.
Indeed.
Training the agent in the same way that we'd be training the models that the agent is relying on in order to say, yes, I like this, or I don't like those sorts of trains, or no, what do you mean I'm getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning? Those sorts of things to help it understand our preferences.
Yeah, you're doing your own retrieval augmentation, but that is on your own sort of your personal wants and likes, which is quite a cool thing in this scenario.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've skipped over the part where you said I was going to give it access to my bank account, and I'm assuming somewhere it's possible to put some sort of block in that says, do I want to approve, or maybe does my company's travel policy want to approve this bit of travel?
Absolutely, but we get scared about these sort of things, or it sounds worrying because it's a new context where we're approaching it from a point of AI. But we've always given access to our banks for direct debits. And if people have multiple accounts, you have the ability to transact. You have to connect them every 30 days, etc. it's very normal. It's only when we say, hey, it's going to be AI doing this that people freaks out, but it will still be in a controlled, here's your spending limits, here's your delegation of authority, whatever it may be. So as long as you've set it up appropriately and responsibly, then it should be okay. We've seen loads of stuff happening on the news from different bots and even chat bots. And it's an implementation nightmare waiting to happen. And I would say I'm looking forward to seeing it, but I'm not. I hope everyone has success.
I'm looking forward to seeing it in theory before I have to rely on it in practice, I think is probably what I'd say. And I guess interesting as this stuff is for travel, just thinking about the business implications, there are business decisions that we make all day, every day, whether they're about deploying individual people, sort of service engineers to a certain task, whether it's investing in a new program, everything from the tiny to the huge. Are we going to buy this company? What sort of role can agentic AI play in assisting human decision makers, or even taking some of those decisions away? What sort of role could it play, and how close would we be to those sorts of things being implemented?
I think it all comes down to the actual use case, right? So if we're doing from a business decision point of view, like managing finances, optimizing, maybe your schedule for your workforce, handling customer service complaints, I think we're already starting to see leaps forward there. And that's where we're going to start seeing the first agent. So, the fact that it can analyze the data, it can compare options, or it can look at policies, which may be the options around what's best to apply based on that business needs, that business regulation policy and constraints, and then recommend moving forward the best choice whilst generating, necessary documents or even decision outcomes. I think that's probably one of the best things it's really good at, and what I like about that more is it's an internal facing agent. So the risk is less because the human in the loop's always present. You're not pushing it out towards a customer. You should still engage your brain. We spoke about this before. Always look at what AI presents back to you and still be the SME on it. If you're not the SME on it, make sure you loop someone in who is. But I think exactly what I said: finances, scheduling, etc. It's going to be fantastic for making those business decisions.
Okay, so these are great examples of what we could do. Let's say you and I have formed our subdivision of Kerv where we're going to do marvelous things, and we want an agent to do something for us. How do we build it? What's the blank sheet of paper? How do we start?
I'm more excited about this subdivision of marvelous things we're going to do. But hey, let's answer that. So I see it in three ways now. Okay, so if you're building an agent, it can be done by a range of people. So that's really important to know. So it doesn't just need to be your technology wizards, but occasionally you do need them. So let's actually jump in, not on the democratized side, but the AI expert side. So for complex agents, that need much more specific machine learning or tailored sort of custom AI models, then of course you're going to need specialists in AI and, those data science coming in. But as we've seen, there are a lot of no-code tools. So many platforms now actually make building agents incredibly accessible to non-developers. Anyone can really do it through those sort of drag and drop, what you see is what you get sort of interfaces. So in the near future, and I'd say arguably now, arguably not, more people without technical skills will be able to build agents. And that's for even complex things like customer service up to sort of more advanced automation. But I would say at the moment, everything's in between those 2 points. And what I mean by that sort of arguably now and arguably not is most cases fall in between those AI experts and then those sort of citizen developer makers, developers without that technical knowledge, working with those with the technical knowledge to help integrate the more advanced and specialist needs that they may have.
And what sort of tools would they be using? I mean, what are there things off the shelf? Is it? And feel free to name products. This isn't the BBC. We can not yet. I'm sure the BBC will be scheduling us soon.
I always try and keep it agnostic because one thing we're seeing actually is we're getting AI coming at us from all directions. But you've got platforms such as Microsoft Agents, so your Copilot Studio gone to agents. And then obviously Google Dialogflow is quite a common one that's used. And then if you look at the more complex, the more advanced, you've got the Azure bot framework, and you've got Google TensorFlow, I think is the other option you have there for those more complex needs. But, both of those, you're still going to need that middle ground, where you have the specialists, the SMEs, and then subject matter experts of what you're building that for. So actually, we talk a lot around what skills do you need for this, but basic, problem solving, but an understanding of the business is always going to be one of the most crucial needs, or of the business case, of the usage, of the process, whatever it is you're trying to automate or create an agent for.
So the business analyst's role hasn't gone away just yet. That ability to understand the problem that we're solving and translate that into the technology is still a really key skill.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where it brings us back to our other podcast, where actually it should be getting easier, though. Because with generative AI in general, it'll be able to, do large portions of that role in a much more efficient framework-driven way for those users. So they should all be leveraging Gen AI, but no, none of these roles are going away anytime soon.
Yeah, that does quite neatly lead us on to the risks and cautions, I think. We know that AI isn't risk-free. We've talked in the earlier episodes about hallucinations, potential data leakage, bias, those sorts of things. If I'm using a tool like a ChatGPT, at least I can see the response it gives me back before I submit it as my history essay or my response to my boss or whatever it is. I've got that human in the loop piece. With agents, I know you absolutely talked about the fact that sometimes there is going to be a human in the loop. You're not going to have it kind of in there at every step. So what is the additional thoughts of governance or testing, or what sort of controls do we need with agentic AI?
It's becoming the more and more apparent topic, isn't it? It's like what you said, because these are autonomous agents. So we say agents, but actually what people are going towards is autonomous agents. Everything you said, the risks, the biases, the hallucinations, it just amplifies because of the lack of real-time human oversight. And that's the worry, right? Especially when it's customer facing. You rightfully called out all the sort of ethical bias in decision-making. It really is a much more interesting world to navigate. But I think businesses can sort of navigate this risk the same way as they would any other risk within technology, which is ensuring they conduct thorough testing, that they do keep a human in the loop, that they don't just see this as an extreme cost-saving exercise. Of course, it will bring certain costs down, but you're still going to want to make sure that human is overseeing a lot of this, especially for high-stake decisions. So the stuff that you think, actually, we can get away with that, then, it depends on your level of risk. But high-stake decisions, I think, is really, really key. I think explainable AI is going to come more and more and more to the forefront to make decisions clear, and then obviously monitoring those systems continuously, keeping a track. Don't just see it as I'm going to throw this out there into the wild and we'll talk about it later and see what happens. And then, of course, all companies should have ethical AI guidelines and adhere to sort of regulations like the EU AI Act. There's some really sensible stuff there. GDPR, we've always known about. We know and love it, or some do. And that just ensures that you're tightening your use of responsible AI rather than just letting it sort of roam around as free as it so wishes.
That's really interesting. And I'm really glad you mentioned, I was going to ask about the ethical considerations. I mean, even just the use of the word agency to describe an autonomous system that doesn't have that human in there, clearly there are going to be ethical implications. And things like the EU AI Act, which is a hard thing to say, that's a lot of vowels in a row, are going to become good guiding principles for ensuring that what we do is in line with society and fitting in with our ethics. Okay, look, that's been really, really interesting talking about this. What should a business do to be preparing themselves for this, making sure they don't get left behind? What are the sort of first steps?
That's the question of the year, isn't it? So I think, simply put, you need to set up sort of an AI enablement program, which that can consist of, governance structures, nurture and adoption approaches, support models, operational models. But I think going through that on the podcast now will create a podcast in itself. So maybe that's one we bring a bit later. But for now, I honestly think governance and that in place, we need to go beyond the buzzword. And everyone's so excited about this still, but actually identifying those use cases that can receive real benefit for this is still the absolutely crucial sort of point that I keep getting to when I speak to clients, that they want AI, they want it now. What do you want it for? I'm not sure, but I really want it. And then looking at that ethical AI, really key. Looking at all the integration of how this will work within the ecosystem of your, not just your technology landscape, but your business as well, because there's a lot of change management around that. And ensuring you've got that skills and training in place, and that scalability, that data security, and everything else that wraps around that. But we are working on, and this is a bit of a plug, I guess, an AI enablement sort of out-of-the-box solution. And hopefully Rufus and I will do a follow-up podcast on that at some point, giving a little bit of a tease.
I look forward to that. I absolutely do. Before we move on to the questions that we've been sent in, I'm just going to ask you to have a look in your hypothetical crystal ball. Where do you think we'll be with agentic AI? I'm going to first ask by this time next year, and then 3 years out? And I know this is an almost impossible question, and I promise not to come and knock on your door in 3 years' time and say, hey, Will, remember you said this? But just give us a bit of a view of the Dorrington thoughts.
Well, I'll keep the Dorrington thoughts only to that question, otherwise it's going to get weird. So I think by the end of 2025, I would hope that we're seeing much more maturity and adoption towards AI in general. And we're starting to see those spurts of agentic AI being adopted. Because if we look at it, any technology does take a while to be adopted. First of all, people are freaked out by it and they say, shut it down. Then all of a sudden it's like, how do we adopt this? Then the use case gets stronger, then everybody's using it. And then you go into the governance side and the enablement side. But I also hope to see that some of the sort of people at the forefront are getting so much better at using agentic AI that they're actually using sort of agent-to-agent type processes. That could be to make those more advanced business processes or even whole departments run a lot more smoother, or just to personalize those interactions. I also think our approach to governing and adopting is going to get a lot more stronger, with actually AI ethics and explainable AI and transparent AI being at the forefront of that. And we'll see the market flooded with how people are achieving it, which I'm very excited about. Maybe there's still some good ideas.
Thank you. I look forward to that. And I'm absolutely with you around that explainability. I think the key to the public adoption and acceptance of this technology is going to be that transparency and the ability to explain what's gone on, why have we made this decision, why is this a reasonable decision to make. I think it's going to be absolutely critical.
No, I agree. And you also asked about a few years out, and I always like to relate back to the 5 levels of OpenAI. The first one we've already done, which is chatbot and conversational AI. Then you get to reasoners, which is, agents. So sort of just before agents, actually. So it's where the large language models can actually start solving relatively basic to advanced problems at a doctoral level. And then you get to 3, which we're starting to get to now. And you'll have noticed that OpenAI's ChatGPT product is pushing this now, which is the agent side. So ChatGPT have announced that they're going to start executing tasks for you within that ChatGPT application. Then you get to the level above this, which is innovators, which is where the model can actually invent something new that's going to change an industry. Okay, something that's brand new, that's never been done in the world before. That's when we get to level 4. So as soon as OpenAI says we're at level 4, that's really exciting, because that could have so much implications for the world, especially if it starts breaking boundaries in the medical frontiers, etc. And then this is the one that I think just blows my mind when you think about it. I don't know if this is 3 years out or not. I'll let you know in a year and a half what my prediction is. But that's organizations. So these are organizations that are completely and autonomously run by AI, providing a service, a product, whatever it may be. And I think there was something crazy, like up to £1 billion in value. But I may be hallucinating myself on that one, but I'll have to double check.
Fascinating. Yeah, really, really interesting. And for anyone who wants to see that 5 levels, I think it's available on the OpenAI website, isn't it? That paper. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Right. We will, before we finish, turn to a couple of your questions. Really, thank you for sending them in. I must admit, when I asked for questions, I did wonder whether I'd be looking at the tumbleweed on the screen, but we've had definitely more than we've got time to handle. So thank you for sending them in. There's a few that are slightly overlapping, so I'm going to try and sort of bring them together. We had a couple of questions, one from Sanjay and one from Flora, around the sustainability and particularly power consumption implications of AI. What's the outlook looking like for bringing down the energy costs for AI?
To be honest, I love that question, because it shows people are putting the sustainability AI first. And as we know, it uses a huge amount of electricity. But we see a lot of advancements in hardware efficiency. So, specialized AI chips, GPUs, TPUs that we're seeing from NVIDIA, etc., they are becoming more efficient. They are lowering energy consumption. At the same time, AI models are actually, they're trimming the fat off as they go. It is something they're conscious about. So I know one of the techniques is pruning, and I think the other thing is some wonderful word like quantization or something, simplifying the numbers that they use within large language models, etc. I also think, and it's not often called out, but I think it is really important, is the application maturity of consultants, of end users is getting more impressive, where they know that they don't need the largest, most powerful models for everything. And actually a small language model can pack a bloody good punch, and they will leverage that instead, which of course has a knock-on effect to the amount of energy that it uses.
So people won't use more than they need to. They use the model that's required to do this particular job, and that could be one that takes, a lot less processor cycles or a lot less memory or a lot less energy to burn.
Exactly that. And then if you couple that with the fact that the models are getting more optimized, and if you couple that with the hardware is getting more efficient, as time goes on, the energy efficiency will arrive.
Interesting, because we've seen big public infrastructure announcements. We've had them in the UK, we've had them in the US. And there is a lot of money going into these infrastructure projects, and I guess managing them in an environmentally responsible way is going to be really critical as well in terms of the way that we build the data centers and source the technology. Great question. Thanks for the question. Another question. This one is from Alfie. He says, how good is the code generated by Gen AI? So when you're asking it to write software, it says, with good prompts, does Gen AI produce code that's instantly applicable, or does a human programmer then have to go and edit it? And he's got a follow-up question which says, is the code produced more or less the same as what a human programmer might have come up with, or are we seeing really new and innovative coding techniques?
That's a really good question, actually. And I think it all comes down to the tool you're using, right? So if you go into ChatGPT and that's what you're using, as your designer buddy, and all of a sudden, it's spitting out this code, it's not going to be as efficient, and we'll get a lot of arguments on this, but I promise you, as going to a codex model, which is using a large language model that has then been trained by billions of lines of code from GitHub and others, to then actually surface, and its only purpose in life is to generate code. So using GitHub Copilot, then using that, a purpose-made tool, is going to be much more efficient, and it's going to have a lot more features to help you. But as we always say with these things, is you still really, really, and I can't emphasize this enough, need to be a subject matter expert on this to be able to look at that and go, that looks really good to me, because it's still representing yourself and your work, and it still hallucinates, it still has biases, and it will still not be 100% all the time. But the feedback I've had from the developers inside Kerv that uses GitHub Copilot and other tools is it's been fantastic, especially with some of the tedious tasks, the testing, etc., etc. So it's definitely speeding up productivity of the developers, and with time, it'll get better and better. From my personal experience, it provides real quality results. And where I love to use it is like today, not feeling 100%. I'm having to drink lots of coffees, feeling a bit tired, and it's doing that heavy lifting for me, which is fantastic.
There's another one on the topic of coding, actually, that says if it's helping programmers, legitimate programmers with their programming tasks, are we seeing bad actors using Gen AI to develop, malicious things?
Absolutely. Whenever you get a powerful tool, people will use it for good, people will use it for bad. The ability to now do much more personalized scamming, etc., has just gone through the roof. But that's the case of our world, unfortunately. As soon as something comes out, there's all sorts of people that make up the world, and everyone will use it.
And it's really interesting because there's another question, a great question from Ed, which says, what are the downsides of Gen AI and how do we mitigate them? And I guess this is a killer one. I was just thinking of phishing emails. So those emails that you get that try to lure you into clicking onto something and either providing just your personal details or credit card details. And typically they were really easy to spot because the language was bad, the grammar was bad, the spelling was bad, the formatting was bad, and you could spot them a mile off. Royal Mail spelt M-A-L-E instead of M-A-I-L or something. Gen AI can write really sophisticatedly. It can write better language than a lot of people, than me on a bad day. And it can also format things brilliantly. It basically makes much more realistic and believable phishing emails, which I think means we really have to up our game from a sort of information security, cybersecurity, in terms of being able to protect against those things. It's a bit like providing the bad actors with good software skills. It's providing them with good English literature type skills as well. That's definitely something that we're seeing really regularly. It's having a significant impact.
But with that, we are seeing tools that will then fight against that are powered by AI as well. And that's always the way as anything advances.
And then I suppose on maybe even achieving a bit more public infamy has been some of the deepfake images and videos. During the UK general election campaign, there were videos of multiple political leaders saying things that they never actually said. And,
misinformation and manipulation is that, it's getting scary. I mean, if anyone followed Cambridge Analytica and the crisis that happened there around the Brexit campaign and the first round of the Trump campaign as well, that can now be done automatically. They don't need to worry about going after these sort of big hubs of very clever data scientists and data engineers and social engineers. A lot of it can be automated, and that's exactly what we've seen. It's an interesting world to be in.
Very interesting world to be in. But there's one really nice question to end with, I think, which is, as a young person interested in AI, what are the best things to be reading to learn about the topic, and what are some tips for breaking into the industry as a young professional?
It's a really good question. I think one of the best skills you can equip yourself with nowadays, and it's often underlooked, people think it's easy, is writing a bloody good prompt. Knowing how to write a prompt and how to get the most out of these tools from a user perspective will be half the success then to understanding them and breaking into the area. If you want to go deeper than that to more the technical approach, it depends if you want to be a data engineer, data scientist, data visualization expert, or even a developer. And all those have their own different paths. You know, going into data science and actually starting to look at the history of AI and how it's got to, you know, the large language model. So looking at how when Google first published that word to vectorization, you know, then came out that attention is all you need. There's a ton of literature out there that will start allowing you to build up how do these colossal foundational models actually work. And it's fascinating. It's just phenomenal. But start off small, start with understanding actually how to use them first and then break into the science is my recommendation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Will. And a recommendation from you is a very worthwhile recommendation indeed. Will, thank you as always. It's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you. I know you've got a ton of stuff to be getting on with, so really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, I love coming on these. I really do, mate. So thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So if you've been interested in what we've had to say, do please get in touch and tell us what you think. You can find out more about Kerv and about AI in general by visiting us on kerv.com. And do please listen out for the next episode. You can subscribe. You can get hold of us on the podcast platform of your choice. Do tell your friends. Thank you also to Kim and for Ed to keep this thing on the road, and to all the guests we've had on this first series. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.